If you are a business owner who's on their journey, but you are trying to work smarter, this podcast, this episode is just for you. My name is Terryl Humphrey. I'm the host of the Phase Knowledge Podcast, where we help leaders turn setbacks into success. And today we're going to talk about the importance of working smart instead of hard. So make sure you got your pen, make sure you got your notebook, and get ready to really hear how to work smart instead of hard. Because one thing that I've learned over the years is that if you're working hard, how are you working smart? If you're not working smart, the hard work that you're putting in will eventually start to pay off. But you have to start working smart first, so that way your hard work can pay off. So get your notebook, get your pen. We getting started. We getting to the process. So the reason why this topic came about today is because yesterday around like maybe 9-10 o'clock at night, and a couple weeks ago, I received a notification from LinkedIn from somebody who was on the podcast, and they posted the picture of the what is called the thumbnail of the podcast. And what I recognized is that wasn't my thumbnail. That wasn't my brand. It wasn't my colors. And what I recognized during this time is that I'm learning how to work smart, so I don't have to work hard. What does that mean? What does that look like? It means that I have to start putting systems, places, processes, and the way of doing the podcast in as a structure. And so when I started to really understand that I just can't wing the podcast episode, I just can't wing the conversation, I just can't wing the graphics, I just can't wing the title, I just can't wing the description, I cannot wing all of these things that come along with the podcast. I have to start working smart. What does smart consist of? Smart consists of as a business. I have to start running the podcast as a business, because if I focus on making the podcast a business or focusing on it as a business, I will eventually run it as a business. Reason why this is so important, because there's an acronym for SMART. SMART, let me share my screen. SMART, the acronym for SMART is, hold on, SM, I gotta spell SMART right. Hold on. SMART. Specific. I actually learned this from my therapist a while ago. Specific, measurable, attainable. Is it attainable? Is it either attainable or achievable? Attainable or achievable. Reachable. Hold on. That's not the R. That can't be the R. Hold on. Now I gotta look it up. Hold on. Now I gotta look it up. Hold on. Now I gotta look it up, because I'm like, nah, that ain't it. That can't be it. Hold on. Let me look it up. SMART acronym. All right. Specific, measurable, achievable. Yeah, I knew it was one of them. Achievable, relevant, and then time bound. Okay, the reason why that's critical is because one thing that I had to really focus on was that, yes, I have so many different goals. The goal that I recently have was having a podcast business making $100,000 within the next 90 days. And needless to say, I failed that 5 different times, and I have yet to hit that goal. I have yet to hit that goal because I didn't have a SMART goal. I had a goal, but I didn't really recognize how I was going to get there. I wasn't specific. I didn't know how to measure it. It seemed achievable at the time, but then I was like, well, how can that be accomplished? How can I accomplish that? And relevant, yes, although a lot of people want to launch their podcast with confidence, there's something that I was missing. And then it has to be time bound. 90 days is enough time. Well, not enough time. However, what I was learning during that time is that I was working hard. I was working hard because I wasn't necessarily focusing on a specific goal. I wasn't focused on a specific action. I wasn't focused on a specific skill. Why? Because I was trying to do so many different things at once, and they stopped my growth. I was trying to go do speaking engagements. I was trying to do social media. I was trying to do webinars. I was trying to do all these different things. And it was like, well, why is everything working? Because everything is not going to work because my time and energy is not going to everything. And so what I had to really learn is that I was working hard. I was working hard because nothing came from that. Nothing, no results, no outcome, no profit, nothing came from that. And so when I started to really position myself as a business, not just as myself, but Failures Knowledge Podcast as a business, there's things that has to be in place. There's things that has to be taken in consideration. There's structure that has to be in place before the conversation even happens. What I learned during this process is that one, yes, you have to have a SMART goal. SMART for the acronym is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And in other words, you have to have a goal that you can accomplish. It's going to challenge you. Yes, it has to challenge you. Nonetheless, you have to have a way to accomplish this goal. And so the reason why I struggle with that, because I'm like, dang, like, how can I go about really making this goal accomplished or achievable? What do I need to start doing? How can I improve? How can I get better? And it taught me, well, if you're going to get better, you have to get specific. What specific action are you taking? And that's what I've learned over the last half a decade is that, yes, I'm in the podcast industry. I'm in the media industry. Nonetheless, if I don't understand the business side of it, how will I be able to make money from it? So then I start going to business, mastermind business communities and business school, just started learning the language of business and how to conduct business. Not only am I learning how to do it, I'm doing the business that I'm learning how to do. Why? Because if I'm learning what I'm applying the knowledge that I have. In order for me to work smart, I have to not work hard and rely on my memory. I have to start writing things down. I have to start planning ahead. I have to start doing research. Why? Because in business, you have to conduct research for the business that you're going to be in, for the problem that you're going to solve, for the solution that you're going to deliver. I literally did research yesterday on other podcast production companies and what they're doing, how they're helping customers, the turnaround time, how they're speaking to their customers. And I'm recognizing, I'm like, oh, I'm learning the language. And at first, what we did was help leaders launch their podcast with confidence. And it was challenging to put myself out there because as I'm informing people what we do, no one is actually saying that I want to do that. In fact, no one is saying that, no one is doing it with me, helping me, let me help them launch their podcast with confidence, because it's maybe that yes, they had like the idea behind it. However, the idea is just an idea without action. And so recently I start to understand, I'm like, all right, cool. Well, how can I focus? How can I be more specific on the action I need to take on a consistent basis, start show up consistently? And the speaking engagement, speaking in public is good. It's great. It's phenomenal, but it takes up so much time. And I started to recognize, I'm like, well, I got to go to the place. Before I even go to the place, I gotta put a presentation together. Once I put the presentation together, I gotta pack my bag. Once I pack my bag, I gotta go to the airport. Once I go to the airport, I gotta get on the plane. Once I get on the plane, I gotta wait 2-3 hours for it. Then when I go to the next spot, there's a layover. There's just so many layers of understanding the action that needs to be taken. And I started to understand, but what if I just focus online? Hold on. What if I just focus online? And this can be via social media, podcast, whatever case is. What if I literally don't go to many speaking engagements right now? What if, this is the laptop, by the way, that's the laptop, by the way. What if I just focus online first? Because I can reach more people than I could while being in person. Why? Because online gives you the capability. Social media gives you the tools to reach people in a place where they need to be reached. And so when I discovered from that, yes, I have to have a smart goal behind it, but I have to have that right action to take. That's the first point we're going to talk about, that you have to have the right action to take. Have the right action. And the reason why I shared that is because if you're trying to do so many different things at once for your business, even though you're a startup, or even though you are a solopreneur, or you're been in business for quite some time, you have to have the right action for you to go to the next phase. Why? Because the right action makes a difference. I can't be everywhere, yet online I can be everywhere. As I'm looking at the information behind the podcast, and I'm looking at different places that I'm in, but guess what? I'm in different locations when I'm at one location to begin with. The podcast is able to reach a broader audience because I'm able to put it out consistently, show up consistently, and really establish authority in the space where we help executives edit and publish their podcast, so that way they can attract more customers. Why is that so important? That's critical. That's a critical factor, because to take smart action, to work smart, you have to learn the action that you're taking. You can't do everything, yet if you do one thing consistently, effectively, efficiently, you will eventually be able to have a business around the one thing that you're doing. For instance, I just thought about this. This is actually pretty good. There's a saying by Bruce Lee that says, don't be afraid of the person who practiced 10,000 kicks. He says, be afraid of the person who practiced one kick 10,000 times. And I used this example in a previous podcast because this is so important. This is so critical, because the person who practiced one skill 10,000 times is a person who understands focus. When you recognize the action that you are taking, when you have the right action to take, you have focus. When you have focus, you have clear direction. When you have focus, you have a smart goal. When you have focus, you're able to say no to a lot of opportunity that's going to be presented to you. When I started to understand, I'm like, all right, cool. All these people on social media, they're going to speak. They're having webinars. They're on social media. Like they're doing all these different things. And what I had to remember, what I had to really learn, is that they're not the only one doing their business. It's literally multiple people in their business, inside their social media profile, that's taking care of the business, that's doing the business. They're not doing everything. In fact, they might not be hands-on to every department. Nonetheless, they know every department inside of their business. Why is this important? When you take the specific action for your business, the specific action will eventually pay off. Prime example, when I focus on the podcast, I get people reaching out to me from various different locations, places I've never been, places I've never visited, places I have never went to. Why? Because the podcast is my focus. In addition to that, I have the podcast, have the webinar, and social media. I'm only focusing on 3 different things, and all of them evolve around one thing, which is online, which is a global reach. You don't know who's watching your content. Somebody say, so I don't know who said this, but it was like, people are always watching. You never know what they're watching from, but they are always watching. And so when I started to understand that, I'm like, oh, that's different. When you have focus, your message, that's not even an M. When you have focus, your message, how you spell message? Hold on. Your message becomes clear. And in the Marine Corps, you have this target, right? And you're right here, and you're on range, and you have to aim for the target. You have to aim for the target. You have different positions that you can get in. You have standing, kneeling, laying. When you aim for the target, you have to focus on your lane. If you're focusing on someone else's lane, you're going to miss the target. Why is that so important? When you understand the action that you need to do for your business, you have to do it consistently. This will pay off because people start to say, man, this person right here is focused around the business that they are doing. This person is focused because they're always talking about the same exact thing. This person is focused because they are accomplishing their SMART goals. How to work smart instead of hard is understanding the action that you need to take on a daily basis. You can't do everything. Hold on. You can't do everything, yet it's not beneficial for you to do everything. Why? Because it takes you off your path. It takes you off your focus. It causes your energy to be separated. It causes your energy to be spread thin. And when your energy is spread thin, how do you have focus? When a person practices one kick 10,000 times, they are focused to get it right. They are focused to improve it. They are focused to make it efficient. How to work smart instead of hard. You have to focus on the one. Webinars, podcasts, social media, all evolve around online presence. If I was to go to in person, have a vendor booth and go speak and do all these different things, that in-person connection is great. However, the time that it takes to go in person is a lot of time, because now you got to drive there, and then you got to set up, and then you got to wait, and then you got to communicate with people. Not that that's bad, but what if you're able to reach the same amount of people via online and make that connection, have that business, and establish the authority that you're looking to establish? I've learned that having a SMART goal is understanding that I have to learn how to focus. And when I learn how to focus, I'm learning how to prioritize the most important things, which are podcasts, webinars, and social media. So the next point what we just went over was that how to have the right action. The next thing that we are going to go over is how to identify how to start saying no. How to start saying no. This is number 2. Number 2 is start saying no. So no is a hard thing to do because there's so many different opportunities that can come. There's so many different opportunities that will arise. There's so many opportunities that will be placed in front of you. But to learn how to decipher from the good and the bad opportunities will help you be able to work smart. When you work smart, you're able to say no to certain different things, to certain opportunities, certain doors that open for you. Why? Because you have to have focus on the goal that you're currently working on. Recently, I discovered, I was like, all right, cool. Now that I understand I'm a podcast production business, what do I need to do on a daily basis so that way I continue to produce podcasts to help executives edit and publish their podcast so they can attract more customers? What action do I need to do so that way I can do it more consistently? I'm literally putting things in place, putting systems in place, putting checks in place, putting processes in place so I can do the same thing over and over and over again, because if I practice one kick 10,000 times, I will eventually have a business. Let me put it in my language. If I practice how to podcast 10,000 times, I will have a podcast business that will help executives edit and publish their podcast so that way they can attract more customers. Why am I constantly saying that? Because if I practice to get it right now, I will practice to get it right later. In business, you have to learn how to say no. When you learn how to say no, you're saying no to things that's going to take your attention away from the energy that you have put into. It's kind of like you are literally starting over every time you start something new. Every time you start something No. What does that mean? Prime example. Back in 2021, when I started my journey, and I started in real estate wholesaling. And real estate wholesaling was a great time for me to be in, a great industry for me to be in, because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about business, sales, marketing, showing up every day, reaching out, cold calling, door knocking, all these different things. As I continue to show up, there's a terminology called the shiny object syndrome, which means that if something caught my attention, I would literally go over there, try something new, and be like, man, I think I got the hang of it. I literally forget the real estate wholesaling and be like, man, this ain't working for me. Let me go try this. What I didn't recognize was that when I left one thing alone and went to the other thing, I was literally starting over from ground zero. Whereas if I would have stayed in real estate wholesaling and understood how to sell, how to handle objections, how to close, how to do the transactions, all these different things in business, if I would have focused primarily on real estate wholesaling, I would have had a successful career. However, my attention was spread thin because I saw one opportunity, then I saw another. I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, he explained, shout out to Robert Kiyosaki, he's the author of that book. He explains that Rich Dad and Poor Dad has two different perspectives. One has a perspective of poor dad has a perspective of working every day, and not necessarily working is bad, but not investing for his future. The wealthy dad understands the importance of investing for his future. And so one is risk, one take a lot of risk, one do not take a lot of risk. And so when I was reading it, I was like, all right, cool. I think I got I grew up in a single parent household, single mother who raised two boys by herself. I'm like, I think I got that same perspective, that same outlook. But what in the book is not supposed to tell you what to choose. In addition to that, it's telling you different things that's out there. The shiny object syndrome will pull your attention away so that you can start all the way over. I've started over so many different times, and I've been learning over and over and over again, but it's like I'm constantly restarting. It's like I'm trying to play Mario Kart, and I get to level 10, and when I get to level 10, the game just restarts, and now I'm back at level 1. Every time you start something new, you start at level number 1. Every time you try something new, you start at the bottom. Every time you take your attention off of what you already are doing, you start to pay attention to other things, and these other things will take your attention off the thing that you're currently doing. Why is that important? Because in business, you have to learn how to say no. Every opportunity that comes to you might seem good, yet is it great for you? Yet is it beneficial for you? Yet will it position you differently? When I started to focus, I learned how to work smarter. When I started to take the right action, I learned how to say no. When I learned how to show up daily doing the same thing over and over and over again, I became a better business owner. It's not the fact that the results that I'm looking for is not coming yet. However, the outcome that I'm looking to achieve, looking to accomplish, only comes from me taking the right action. And when I was doing webinars just a couple of weeks ago, one, it was working because people are literally coming to the webinars. I set up the Facebook ads, the creative. Hold on. Let me just draw it out. So I set up the pictures. Let's just say picture. Then I set up the ad. Let's do it like that. And then I set up the, let's say, website /funnel. And then I set up the presentation. Then I set up the offer. Then I set up the follow-up. Then I set up the reminders. Then I set up the abandoned cart. AB. All these different things were set up for one funnel, for one presentation, Why? Because if people don't come to your presentation, that means it's not working. That means something in your process, in what you're setting up is not working. And when I started to see the results, I was like, oh, it's working now. What I've been trying to do for a long time is finally working. So what if I put all my time and energy into podcasts, webinars, and social media? What if I just primarily focus on that? I don't know what can come from it, but what I do know is that I will have a business because I'm not all over the place. Social media feeds podcasts, webinars. Podcasts, webinars, and social media. Social media feed the podcasts feed the webinars feed the podcasts. It's kind of like an infinity loop. It's constantly revolving around the same exact thing because everything I'm doing is online. And when I had a mentor call the other day, and they proceeded to explain that you when you understand that you're in business, and every time you're in business, something might be changing, something might be improving, you might be changing, whatever the case is. There's a saying that says there's an infinity loop. It's always going, it's always evolving, or it's always going around. In addition to that, you're constantly improving with the loop. Hold on, this way, with the loop. Why? Because it's infinity changes. And I remember I joined the training just so I can see what's working, what's not working. I noticed I didn't receive no notifications. Now picture this. Remember how I mentioned earlier about doing speaking engagements, going to different places, and having vendor booths, sponsoring things of that nature? If I didn't put the time and energy into webinars, podcasts, and social media, I wouldn't have caught that, because my attention would have been spread thin. In addition to that, the action that I was taking would not cause me to work smarter. It would have caused me to work harder, because now I have to figure out what's not working. In addition to that, if I'm doing so many different things, how can I catch that error? How can I catch that mistake? How can I catch that issue? I can't, because I'll be spread it too thin. Now that my focus is narrow and I'm literally narrowing on podcasts, webinar, and social media, the focus that's there, I'm able to catch the errors a lot faster. I'm able to catch the errors because I'm working smarter. I'm able to catch the errors because I'm able to say no. When you say no to opportunities, when you say no to new challenges, when you say no to things that's going to separate your attention, your focus becomes more clear because you now are working more smarter. When you work smarter, you get smarter. When you get smarter, you have more results. The reason why that's so important is because when you have the results for your business has to be the focus, because if you're trying to do so many different things, you're not going to have the results that you're looking for. Yet if you do the same thing over and over and over and over again, then eventually you will have a business. I literally been doing podcasting ever since a half a decade ago, five years ago, since 2021. And as I've been doing podcasting, I've been getting a lot better. As I've been getting a lot better, I've been operating as a business. I had a call the other day, and the call that I had, that was like, man, this process is so different. When I go on other people's podcasts, I don't receive anything. They don't communicate with me. They just say, hey, I just want to make sure you can hold a conversation. I said, not us. We want to understand your journey, your story, and how you gained this success. Nonetheless, this is a business. This has to be operated as a business because this is my focus. This is my strength. This is something that I'm constantly changing, improving, and evolving. What this is doing is that it's helping me say no to opportunities going to take my attention away from everything that I'm doing. When I start to understand the growth behind focus, no became a big word for me, because no, I don't want to go do so many different things. I need to get this podcast production company up where we help executives edit and publish their podcasts to attract more customers. The last thing that we are going to talk about, before I say the last thing, the first things that we just spoke about was that in order to work smart, you have to take the right action. And when you take the right action, you are learning how to focus on one particular thing. This next thing that we went over was start saying no You have to keep your focus centered. You cannot be all over the place, yet you can be on some place, because at some point in time, you will eventually build the business that you're looking to establish. Last thing that we are going to speak about is to document. Hold on. God, I spelled that wrong. Document. Oh, there we go. Document. Ray, what it do, man? I can't even see that. All right. So the last thing that we're going to talk about is document your process. In other words, write. I'm gonna put that in parentheses. Write down your steps. And this is how you create a system. This equals system. I made in a podcast episode in addition to the podcast trailer. And before I started I didn't even write that. I didn't even show it on the screen. Before I started to understand what I was doing, I was like, all right, cool. I got it in my mind. So when I record the podcast, before the podcast, what we'll have a discovery call. All right, so cool. This is discovery call where we learn more about each other. I tell you more about Failures Knowledge Podcast, and I tell you, and you share with me more about your journey. Excuse me. In addition to that, right after on the discovery call, once we get done doing the introduction, the background, and what to expect, I sent 2 links. All right, cool. Now I'm going to send you an interview, and then I'm going to send you another calendar link so that way you can schedule for the actual podcast. Then once they schedule it, they get reminders, they get backstory, what to expect, the format of things of that nature. Once they receive that, let's just say that I have a podcast tomorrow. When I have the podcast tomorrow, well, they already know what to expect. Well, they already know the format of it. And in addition to that, they don't have to guess on how the conversation is going to go. They had an example before. They received the backstory. They received further information. But it's like now when we have the podcast, we're just having a conversation. Right after the podcast, I will ask for a testimonial. And I'm learning how to add not only for Google reviews, but for a verbal testimonial as well. So, all right, cool. I'm about to stop recording. Thank you again for coming on to the Failures Knowledge Podcast. Stop recording. Once I stop recording, we have a small conversation. Before we get off, I ask for a testimonial. Why am I sharing this? I'm sharing the steps to help me work smarter. Right after the podcast, there's an email and notification that says, thank you for coming on to the Failures Knowledge Podcast. We enjoyed learning your story. In addition to that, if you'd like to leave the same review on Google, here's the link. Why am I doing that? If I work smart to document the steps of the business that I'm building, I will be able to do it more consistently. So then, once we have the podcast, check this out. Once we have the podcast and the conversation is done, right after that, I say within 7 days, within 7 days, the actual podcast will be posted. Throughout that 7 days, within that 7 days, you will get a podcast trailer. In addition to that, what I'm about to start saying now, because I started to recognize that people wasn't getting the graphics or the images. They want to get the podcast trailer in addition to the graphic. Now, what this does is that it set expectations. When I started to document the process and I can explain it clearly, I was like, oh, I'm becoming a business. I'm becoming focused. And there's a saying to say, well, this video is about how to work smart instead of hard. When I'm working hard, I have to think about every step of the journey, every step of the customer experience that a person is going to come experience. And I'm like, man, what am I doing wrong? I literally had to customize everything every time someone reached out or someone wanted to get on the podcast. But I'm like, man, that's overwhelming. I need something in place so that the steps can be consistent. And when I started to understand the importance of implementing the steps, my life just completely changed. Why? Because I'm no longer scattered and all over the place. If I'm going to do business, I need to do business strategically. How to work smart instead of hard. You have to document the steps. You have to write the steps down so that way you understand the steps and the process that you are going to experience. There's a book, and it's called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's a restaurant book. Nonetheless, it's a book that talks about the customer experience. When you focus on your customer experience, that's what. Hold on, I'm about to share my screen now. Hold on. When you focus on your customer experience, you see things before they happen. See things before they happen. I did a podcast last week. In fact, the podcast that I'm working on today. I did the podcast, and here's what gave me confidence. Like, man, I'm doing the right thing. During the podcast, he literally said that he clicked the ad, or they clicked the ad. Their team clicked the ad, put their information in, waited, nothing happened. I said, bro, that happened to you too? I said, man, oh my goodness. And it goes back to focus on, don't focus on 10,000 kicks. Focus on one kick 10,000 times, because in the middle of the training, in the middle of the process, you will start to see things that people are going, or you are going to see things that you can often miss. And so when he said that, I was like, man, that gave me some type of relief, because I'm doing business right now. Back then, I was winging it. Back then, I was customized. Back then, it was like I needed to do it this way. So whenever somebody come onto the discovery call, they say, well, are you going to send the questions beforehand? I said, I'm going to send you the format. I'm not sending you the questions because the questions is different for everybody. Nonetheless, I'm going to send you the format. The format is the same for everybody. Why did I start doing that? Because people kept asking me, are you going to send the questions beforehand? And I'm like, no, I ain't going to send no questions. That was me back then. That was me when I didn't understand business. As I started to understand business, I'm like, oh, people are asking for the questions so they can know what to expect. Oh, got it. Okay. People are asking for questions so they can understand, or so they can know how to prepare for how to answer the questions. So instead of them asking the same question over and over and over again, and me not having a response, I literally had to document how to do it. So that way, when somebody asks, are you going to send the questions beforehand? Yes. Well, I'm going to send you the format. The format is the same for everything, yet the question is going to be different because everyone's story is unique to them. When I started to listen, when I started saying that, I became a better business owner. Reason being is because I was documenting the process. The documentation is so important, because if you don't know the steps that you're doing, you are winging your business. To have a podcast production company who help executives edit and publish their podcasts to attract more customers, I have to document how to go about doing that. I have to document the sales call. I have to document the process. I have to document the follow-up. I have to document the update. I have to document so many different things. But I tell you this, once it's documented, you can do it over and over and over and over and over again. Why? Because all you have to do is just follow the steps. All you have to do is look at the steps and say, oh man, okay, step number 1, press record. Step number 2, make sure the audio good. Step number 3, like you can follow the steps. When you document your process, you are working smarter, because you're no longer guessing what step 1 is, what step 2 is, what step 3 is, what step 4 is, what step 5 is, so on and so forth. That helped me start to work smart, because the process was documented. And because the documented is documented or recorded, I'm able to just follow along. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. Step 4, do this. Oh, step 3, I can go back to it. Business, I don't know who said this. I had a podcast with somebody, and when they said it didn't make sense, but now it makes sense. Business is not random. Business is strategic. Business is planned out. business is SMART. Specific, measurable, achievable, reachable. Hold on. Was it reachable? Hold on. Where'd it go? Start over. Oh, okay. SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. Why? Because you have to understand the business that you're doing. When you document your process, you are learning how to work smart and not hard. And when you work smart, you're able to do it over and over and over again. I tell you this. I tell you this right quick. The last thing I wanted to share, right? I see the importance of documentation. Whoever come on to the discovery call, it's a discovery call to learn more about you, so that way you can learn more about me. And in addition to that, you can know what to expect from that. All right, cool. Right after the discovery call, you're going to get 2 links. An interview and another calendar link. I want you to be prepared what to expect, so that way you can know, like, oh, this is an example. This is a great example. In addition to that, when people start reaching out to me, I have no clue where they're reaching out. I literally have a template, and I say, thank you for reaching out. Click here for the discovery call. When you go to discovery call, we can talk further. Why? Because people start to reach out to me, or I start to reach out to other people, and it's like, well, now I'm guessing because everything is customized. However, what if I just document the process? So in order to work smart for your business, you have to learn how to document your process, because when you document your process, you are learning the steps that it takes to complete your business. So in conclusion, what we just talked about today, this episode was about how to work smart instead of hard. You have to have SMART goals: smart, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And the first one that we went over is that you have to have the right action. If you're trying to do so many different actions and so many different things, you're not going to do nothing, because you'll be spread thin. The next point that we went over is starting to say no. Every time you start something new, you're literally starting at level 1. You're literally starting at ground level 0, because you have to understand what you're doing. You got to be educated. You got to learn. You got to do all these different things. And the last thing that we talked about was my favorite was to document your process. In other words, write down the steps that you are doing for your business, so that way your business can be operated as a business and not as a passion. And so, if you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments your biggest takeaway on how to work smart for your business instead of working hard. Lastly, I want to close off with this. You're only one failure away from changing your life and from turning that failure into knowledge. So don't be afraid to fail, because failure is knowledge. I appreciate y'all. Hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button. Then I'll see y'all on the next episode.